Good afternoon, how are you? Well, Thomas Jefferson's taking care of us. It's 70 degrees out, 44% humidity, and the winds are at 6 miles an hour. I feel a slight breeze. And I'm starting out a different way, hoping that the bugs will be less today. There have only been a couple of attacks, and here the wind may push them away a little bit, so I don't know. Perception becomes reality, and reality then can become or seem to be absurd. I'm pretty sure it's H.G. Wells wrote a novella, and the title of it was in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And it's a paraphrase. I know it's not right, but that's the sense of it. And it's a marvelous story about how a man gets trapped in a valley, and he can see, but nobody in the valley can see. And this, you would think, would be a tremendous advantage. But because he acts differently, because he can see what he does, they think there's something wrong with him, and they figure the best way to make him whole is to take out that seeing eye. Now there's a phenomenon in a small island, I can't remember the name of it, but you'll get the principle in a minute. From the time of birth, the inhabitants of this small island see only in black and white. And this condition you can get elsewhere, but often people do not have this condition from birth. So they've seen color. But a scientist went there to inquire about it and to study it, and he found how they thought seeing black and white was superior if they had the colors they've never seen. So, what about Trump? If we take a snapshot today, or perhaps any time since 2015, if not before, it should come as no surprise that our one-man crime wave has violated the law. And one good example is the struggle about the deportation of Garcia in violation of law and fact and practice. And the fact that he was wrongly removed is known and not in dispute. So, is he a person who sees things in black and white? Is he a person who would take out the eyes of anyone to prevail? The truth is, this little exercise only raises the puzzle. Why are some people, as Trump is, a heinous individual who has no redeeming social value, is considered evil by many, respects no law, no constitution, and has been convicted of it, and various other misconduct? So, Trump is now trying to say Garcia is really about illegal immigration. This, however, begs the question. The case has not been proven against Garcia. That is to say, no one has listed the charges. There has not been an investigation of those charges and what they are sufficient to cause in terms of penalty or conditions. There's been, therefore, no opportunity to be heard in opposition to it. That's all of that is due process, fundamental fairness. So, how is the administration dealing with that? The way they've dealt with everything else. A fire hose of slanders, unproven. And the defense to a slander is the truth. But the stuff they say about him is not related to the charges. And it's the kind of thing that people do when they disagree with someone else. They pick on something not relevant or material. And they say, see, he's that person. So why do you want to help him anyhow? And it is because what's at stake is an individual right. And what's the difference between a right and a statute that says you can or can't do something? A right, a constitutional right, is something one person can assert against everyone else. So if everybody wants to hang him, and he says, you may not hang me, because that would be cruel and unusual punishment, to hang me without proving anything, without a state of law, without a right to be heard. I have a right to have counsel, but I don't have it. That's another right. I can assert that right against anybody else. And it doesn't matter if you're not a citizen, because the terms of this right refer to a person. They can't search me. They can't prevent me from being critical of the government. First Amendment. So you see, the problem here is the categories that should dictate our discussion. But for some reason, when people talk about these things, they don't actually talk about the rights of the individual versus everyone else. They talk about red lines that we cross. Why are we talking about red lines? Is that to blunt the accusation that this is an unconstitutional violation of individual rights and liberties? Conscious or not, that's the effect. This is why, I'm sorry for shifting gears a little bit, the difference between Roe v. Wade and what's happened since is Roe v. Wade had determined a constitutional right to be let alone, based on the Constitution. That is the right to be let alone. The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, to be secure in your person. The Fifth Amendment, due process. You know, that the facts justify that right. And since that time, since that right has been lost by this corrupt Supreme Court, what we have is a diminution of the status of woman and her rights by those people who don't believe women should have the rights they do, should not be as active as they are. I'm talking about Trump and his gang of thieves. So, in this package of rights, we have Garcia. And we have the government trying to find ways to tear him apart so we'd miss what the argument's about. I think I mentioned before that Cicero preferred a figure of speech called preterition. So he would get up and say, it doesn't matter that this gentleman here rapes children, kills women. No, let's pass on to the fact that he's stealing money from the Roman treasury. Preterition. I pass over the things that are not relevant to discolor the individual, and then I talk about the real charges. Preterition. Now, even the Supreme Court, in its Saturday morning decision this weekend, they thought to check Trump's plan to deport on Friday last more migrants. The Trump team is driven by arrogance, incompetence, hate, and together it makes a bitter brew. And it's ironic that we're talking about this on Easter Sunday, when a reasonable government would have bought into the symbol system and said, we bring a new life to him, whatever else follows here, and we'll follow the Constitution and we'll correct this error. How is that? I'm certain that the right way to describe Navarro is dancing hands. And dancing hands and Donnie's Trump and magic tariffs are sinking economies at home and abroad. They're affecting the rich, from the rich to the poor, across the planet. How do we tolerate this? How does this persist? The judges who are hearing cases are showing courage. They're being careful. They're moving with discipline, the righteousness of the law, and the basis of the facts. And there are lawyers appearing before them, as has been true in the past in difficult times. Lawyers who fight for the individual rights, fight for the law firms to have the rights to exist and to do what they're supposed to do by the various amendments to the Constitution, and barring their access to the government so that they can't represent people, and slandering them for doing their jobs in the past, are part and parcel of the bullying that is Trump. Now, we've seen the firms that have shown courage, that fulfill the image of a lawyer fighting for a client, perhaps even his or her own firm. What has happened? First, consider, going back to Watergate. There were the lawyers who fought for the rights, for a good government. And then there were those who were on the other end of their investigations. And some of those went to jail, gave up careers to serve an illegal president, a president who walked away. He still did have to fight the rest of his life to try to put together a resume, a legacy, if you will. But it remains the same today. Dick, Tricky Dick, that's who he was. So how did the law firms weaken such that they're exposed to Trump doing what he's doing with them? And I think it has to do with how firms worked when I was younger. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the firms, because I went to one for a short period of time. It was, in my case, a great experience. But they wanted me to stay when I wanted to go to the Hill. And I think they cared to try to persuade me to do something they thought was what I should do. I didn't do that. But in those days, when I was younger, the law firms would encourage people to come to a law firm and expect to have an idea whether it would be a partner in 3, 4, 8 years, sometimes more than that. And I was never interested in that. It's fine for others, but it wasn't fine for me. And the idea was that you grew a professional family. And that worked somewhat. But over time, firms turned into poaching machines. They would take over entire client bases of some people, and they'd bring that person and all their business to their law firm. And they get unbelievable income from that. And the young persons who worked there became, working bodies. They had no time to themselves, and they worked for the promise of joining the firm, being a part of it at some point. And so you had lawyers making part of the firm based on the clients they could bring. And so, whereas talent was cultivated from within by those who hoped to be on a partner track, we're bringing people from outside based on a transaction that would bring a lot of income to the firm. So what do we lose? Well, we lost a sense of the professional family, and we also lost loyalty, and perhaps great challenges to ethics. So that's why some firms are making it law firms and fighting, and others are not. It has to do perhaps with the DNA over time of these law firms. And if they're representing the wealthiest in an administration that brags about the billionaires, their oligarchy, then what are these firms supposed to do? But can't they see the betrayal when they're being asked to do something the law can't require, and judges have already denied, and those firms that have challenged Trump? So these are the knotty issues we're faced with. I still think the drift is in our way, but it requires us to persist. It requires us to be more people involved and to fight for it. And that's not as easy to obtain. Now, I have a kind of interesting story. I don't know if you're familiar with Antoni Gaudí. He's an amazing artist. And when you hear the term that's gaudy, it emanates from his art. And many years ago, late 60s, early 70s, I was in Barcelona. And his cathedral, one of his cathedrals, I think he has several, but he has one particularly in Barcelona. And it looks, in a way, like it's melting in a decorous manner. And he intended and meant to exalt Christians by this edifice he created. Well, now the Pope is considering making him venerable, a step in the path to becoming a saint. Now, I think of him as an artist. I think of him as a worthy artist. But by this connection, it seems to me, any great painting made, or music, or sculpture, or architecture, can that make you venerable and perhaps saintly? I don't know. But it's nice to think about it on Easter Sunday. Type in Gaudi, G-A-U-D-I, if you haven't heard of him before. And you'll find you're getting a break from the mishigas. That is what we do as we, on a daily basis, resist the errors and illegal acts and senseless hate and hurt leaped upon this nation by Trump and his cabinet of idiots. So, nice talking to you. And bugs didn't really bother me going this way today, but it's not over yet. I'll report tomorrow how the rest of my walk goes. And so for now, I say goodbye with that rooster to the Cathedral of Trees. All the best. Bye-bye.